Okay, we are live. Welcome everyone. So, how many of you are at Starfish for the first time? Right. Some new faces. We've been doing this for now like a year or two, and we primarily focused on blockchain and emerging tech. So we do a lot of tech talks. We introduce the community with new and exciting projects. Blockstack is actually not that new. From what I know, they've been doing their thing for quite a while, and now they're really making some waves. So I'd like to pass the microphone to you, and you'll be able to give your presentation. All right, then. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. This is my first time with the microphone, so if I get too close, just go. I'm sure you're all wins, so that'll work. My name is Mary Anthony. I'm a documentation engineer and trainer with Blockstack. I'm based here in the Bay Area. Blockstack is out of New York. So with that, I'm going to get started. How many people here are here because they saw a Can't Be Evil advertisement for Blockstack? A couple of people, maybe? This is a hashtag that we just came out with a couple of weeks ago. And it's based on a riff of Don't Be Evil. Anybody here, can you tell me where Don't Be Evil comes from?
Google. The old Google.
The old Google, right? So this was their motto about, I think they stopped using it in 2018. So they didn't really, when they chose that, they didn't have what we now think of as evil in mind. They were all about getting good access to data for their customers. It was customer facing. And so nowadays, though, we kind of associate this term evil with companies like Google or Facebook or Twitter. Anybody out there, what do you think it is to be evil in this context of a company like one of these cloud computing companies? Anybody want to say anything?
Lying, cheating, and stealing?
Lying, cheating, and stealing? I don't think they intend to do that. What are they stealing? They steal your data? What do they lie about?
They tell you that they're not shadow banning you when they are.
Okay, they tell you that they're not shadow banning you when they are. Anybody else want to say why they think okay?
Primacy of profit.
Primacy of profit, yeah, there was an announcement today. If you follow the news, the markets, a bunch of companies got together, they decided that they were going to do things other than work for their shareholders, but work for our public good. So maybe being evil is not working for the public good, right? Okay, so our hashtag though is Can't Be Evil. What does that mean to you? Like, what are you looking for? What attracted you? If you've heard this before, what do you find attractive about that kind of statement in the context of software? I can point to people. I'm not a teacher, but thank you. What?
Guardrails?
Guardrails? What kind of things are guardrails, do you think? What kind of guardrails would you anticipate?
Not allowing the developers to be able to like data or work the data that they want.
Right, not allowing your developers or your application creators to actually get their hands on your data. That might be one thing. Actually, we're just streaming something from Edward Snowden. He said it would be neat if everybody could have their own little bucket of internet, which I thought was pretty cool. And you'll see why I might think that's cool, being from Blockstack here in a second. So Can't Be Evil is this hashtag that we've come up with, and we had some billboards along the 101 and got a lot of good feedback on that. And it is a principle that attracted me to working at Blockstack, and let's talk about what we mean by that. So, so for us, what we mean about being evil is all the ability, the construction of these cloud computing companies that allow for a lot of breaches. They have all our data, and they don't do good security practices. That data gets released, whether or not we want it to happen or whatnot. You have to, as a consumer, feel like you're being watched, which isn't fun. Sometimes it excludes developers, so they might have a monopoly that as a developer, you feel like you can't break across into a similar market because of the monopoly these companies have. And also there's a lot of cost and overhead with deploying apps in this situation. And what we think is happening is, and you might be aware of this too, you know, we started in this mainframe era in IBM, the desktop era in Microsoft. I actually was in that era myself at the very beginning. And then the cloud era, I also saw that came on. So that's kind of fun to understand the movement into the cloud computing era. Now we believe that this new decentralization era is coming apart upon us. So the idea here is this is a new transformative point in time in software, and if you're in blockchain era, crypto space, what we call normally the decentralization era, you're going to be bringing about a change in the way people interact with applications, and you're going to allow them to have stronger digital rights as opposed to the rights they get right now, which is I sign up for Twitter, it's free for me to use it, but they are taking my data, they're making assumptions about me, they might be right, they might be wrong, same with Facebook, same with Google, same with any kind of company where you get free access and they get to do some analysis of what you're doing. So in the decentralization era, we're trying to break this monopoly of data so that data is owned by the user as opposed to the application. We want to make sure that everything has an identity that's disassociated from an application. So you have a single identity you use on many applications, and the data you create on those applications are yours to use and to take with you, so that when you leave an application, that if I were to leave Facebook, I don't have to go and ask them, can I download my data and do a whole process to get my data removed from that application. So that is, in a nutshell, what Can't Be Evil means to Blockstack. It's this bringing back digital rights to the application user. And how do we plan to deliver these rights? We're going to leverage our public blockchain, so users own their own identities. And we're going to do leveraging of cryptography together with cloud computing to ensure that they have the data as well. In a way, we're going to give them a little bucket of internet. So what is this new era going to be based on? Let me talk a little bit about Blockstack's architecture. So we have an identity layer. You can visit core.blockstack.org. That's our service running now. You can actually run your own service of this as well. It relies on our Atlas peer-to-peer network and the Blockstack naming system. It's running the blockchain. You see this down here at the bottom. Our blockchain right now, the Stacks blockchain, is only doing two things really: registering names and tracking transactions of Stacks coin. The DNS layer that's involved also in this core node is what's mapping an individual's identity, private key, to our data layer. Let's see. This is just a shot of the Blockstack Explorer, so you can go and look at this at exploreblockstack.org, and you can see from this that the limitations in terms of what the blockchain is actually doing. We're not storing data on the blockchain. It makes it much more efficient and faster than a standard blockchain, or what typically other chains are doing, or other similar technologies. The data layer that we have is also decentralized on what we call Gaia Hub. This is a technology for storing data off the chain. And you can run your own private Gaia Hub. If you want to provide Gaia Hubs to somebody else, you can do that also with our technology. And the idea here is the identity that's created through the DNS service will allow somebody to access their data on a Gaia Hub or give permissions to an application to access that data. Let's see. and you can actually access the Gaia Hub running right now. We run one at hub.blockstack.org. I've spun up my own one. Go to our documentation to find out how to spin one up yourself. We also have the application layer. This is allows you to write a client on any device that client can then authenticate through our Blockstack.js library and access the data that's stored on the Gaia Hub. It's very quick to generate an app with Blockstack. One of our guiding principles was to encapsulate the blockchain layer, meaning you don't need to know any kind of smart contracting language to interact with or build a Blockstack application super quick. It also allows it to scale because we're not storing data on the blockchain. The applications can still scale really quickly. We have app generation to React, Webpack, and Vue, and we also had iOS and Android mobile SDKs. It's just a picture of the Blockstack.js library. It's pretty simple. You can see we have a very limited number of classes. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Matt's going to come up here and sort of walk you through actual code. This is just to show people how quick it is to create an application. If you run our app generator, you get this little single-page app right out of the box. The idea here then is if a user clicks on sign in with Blockstack, they go through the authentication process through our DNS servers. That gives the identity an opportunity, the person with the identity, to say, do I want this application to access my data? So you can see, this might be opposite of what you're used to now. Now, you ask the app permission to get in and use their services so they can take your data. And this is kind of the reverse, where you say, allow this app to use my data. When you sign out of the Blockstack application, that app no longer has access to the data store because it no longer has an authentication key inside of the local storage. And Matt will go into some more detail about how that happens. Now, when we designed Blockstack, we didn't believe that most applications needed smart contracts. So it's very easy to create an application without having to write in special smart contract code. What we did this year, come out with the Clarity language. It's currently in a developer preview. We have a full set of documentation online. We have a Docker container you can use to spin up and work with the language right now. And we expect to have a testnet up before 2019. So the whole point of Blockstack architecture is to bring back these digital rights that you find important to people. Self-sovereign identity, meaning you take your identity, it's you. You can create multiples if you want to, but you move with your identity from app to app instead of going to each app and asking to create a username and password. This is a major shift for a lot of people developing apps, a lot of people using apps, and I think there's also room for people to solve problems for users in this area, especially usability problems. It's very hard to believe that if I lost my key to an identity, that's it, I can't get it back. And so I think there was a recent, recently some crypto company had one of their founders passed away. It was the only key to a particular stack of coins, I forget who it was. But that kind of thing can happen with an identity when you access an app. What will happen in the case of Blockstack, though, is you lose access to your data in the Gaia store. The application doesn't retain any access to that data. So you can spin up a new identity and create another store if you wanted to. So you own your own data. That's another digital right. And also there's no reliance on centralized services. So you can spin up your own hub. You can, when you create your identity, point your identity to that hub, and then the hub belongs to you entirely, or you can use the Blockstack default hub, or perhaps in the future, if we have people who want to build their own hub services for folks, we'll have those as well. We don't have them right now, but one of you might decide to do that. So we're also trying to make stuff happen in the blockchain world with these decentralized applications. So we have an outlining program. So you can visit this at app.co mining latest. That'll take you to the winners of that month's app mining program. So every month we're giving out over 100K in Bitcoin. We'll soon switch to our coin stack. Translates into 20K for this top app for this month of July, and so on and so forth down the line. So you enter your application. It's judged using algorithms that we came up with, working with some pretty smart gamers. We have a set of reviewers that look at each application and rank them, and then we put out every month who won what. And you, as an application developer, can look at what analysis was done on your app. You can use that to increase your ranking in the next month. So it's pretty interesting. We actually have been super successful with that. We have over 180 application teams and 3,000 plus developers who are actively entering this program. And we're looking for more, which is part of the Can't Be Evil program that generated this talk tonight. If you're interested in getting started with app mining with Blockstack, we actually have a particular tutorial that teaches you about application mining. That's really good if you want to know what the process is, if you want to understand what's required to submit an application, there are some requirements, and if you want to work through it at the end of that, if you submit a sample, you should. But we also have more technical tutorials. Hello Blockstack, typical hello world. We have a to-do list, we have a storage tutorial, and we have a ton of community resources. One guy in particular spent quite a lot of time building videos. If video is your preferred way to learn on React. Okay, so if you want to learn more, there's documentation, you can participate in a forum, yada over here. I think this will be made available to you. And we're going to have Matt come up in a little bit and give you a sort of a more in-depth code demo. So I think we now have time for questions. If there's anybody who has a question. Oh, there's another microphone there. We can do it. Somebody has that.
Thank you. Most people are actually quite known out about this, losing their identity, corporation, and you think about what Facebook is doing, and then all my friends are still posting to Facebook, so I don't understand what's going on there. In order for this thing to really take off, you also have to create so much real content that people are interested in, so they would switch over from their addiction to those big corporations. So given those two situations, how do you see this going forward?
So these kinds of applications, this whole problem of getting people into this new wave of computing is what y'all probably know of. I didn't know until I joined Blockstack. This is called a two-sided market. So what we're trying to do is we started out by emphasizing developers, getting people to write applications, hoping that we can get somebody who's talented enough to write a breakthrough application that people want to use. And then the other side of the market are the users, the people who are going to actually help drive the growth of the market. Those are two things that are pretty common problem with two-sided market. It's sort of like, Tesla. He can build all the cars he wants, but if you can't fuel it outside of your home, he's got to go build fueling stations. So the idea here is not that we have to wait for that application to come along, but we have to generate it. Part of that is people like me going out and talking to people like you. Maybe there's somebody out there right now in this room who's going to come up with the next generation of application. And part of what we have to solve as an industry is to make it easy for people to understand what an identity is. It really is a user problem they don't understand. how, if they lose their identity, they can't come to us for it. But on the other hand, users that do find out that they have this kind of control, so that that identity gives them access to data and control of their own data, there's a real growing desire for that. So we actually have people who show up to our engineering meeting who are just users who are that excited about this new field. So remember, if you go back to that second slide where we showed cloud computing, used to be people didn't put their stuff on the cloud. You know, oh, how do I know that somebody isn't going to access it? Well, when it first started, we didn't think people could, right? And there are a ton of companies like Blockstack and countries and governments investing in cloud computing, if you go back and look at the history, and they built the market. And so part of what this outlining is doing is building this market. And if you're here talking and thinking about building, you're going to be in the ground level of what could be and what a lot of people think is going to be the next big thing. So it's not going to be easy. I think it's a great question, and it's something that we're only beginning to touch the surface of answering in a good way.
What does it mean when you say that someone owns their identity? Give me an example. Like, I kind of envision it like I have the credentials, nobody else does. So I can go from app to app. And you couldn't possibly log in as me because you don't have my credentials. You don't even have to store it somewhere. But then I think in the context of like Coinbase, and I want to close down my Coinbase account, I can't close it down. Most applications you actually can't close down your account.
Yeah, so Coinbase is really a service that you're logging into.
Didn't mean to put a finger at Coinbase.
Oh, no.
Any service.
Yeah, so when you create an identity with us, it's the only thing that's actually recorded on our blockchain is that identity. And so it has the security in terms of it's encrypted on blockchain. It lives across all the different iterations of that chain, the distributed database of it. And only you have the key to that identity. So when you go to blockstack.org or browser.blockstack.org, you can create an identity like this, and we'll give you a 12-word key phrase and a recovery code. And if you lose those two things, you can't get back into your identity. And so that's what we mean by owning your identity. Like right now, if you created an account on Facebook, I think somebody said shadow banning. I think they were talking about Twitter, but Facebook, it actually owns your account. You don't really own it. You believe you do because you're interacting with it, but if they wanted to turn you off and say no more Facebook for you, once you feel great relief, you might just be a little bit sad that you can't see your nieces and nephews doing all the nieces and nephew stuff. Speaking for myself, that's the only reason I use that. Which I never have. But I guess what I'm saying is you own it because you're responsible for it, like the key to your house. If you lose the key to your house, you're either, assuming your house had no windows and they only had one door and you're not getting back in without a locksmith, well, it's a little bit worthless an identity, you're not getting back in at all. So that's what we mean by owning your identity. You're responsible for maintaining access to it. There's somebody to call back up and say, I have it. But it also means that somebody else can't spoof you, look to be you, unless you gave them their keys. Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Amin. Thanks for the presentation. It was really useful. I have a question around your Stacks blockchain.
Sure.
You mentioned Blockstack Explorer that we can go and confirm transactions, but that's from UI side. Is there going to be any implementation close to running a full node and really confirming your transactions on Stacks blockchain, other than like trusting some UI, even if it's built by Blockstack as well?
Okay. I'm not in depth on the blockchain side of the things, but you can use the core API to interrogate the blockchain. You can also use the command line to interrogate the blockchain. So it's not, that whole UI is built on top of, if you go to core.blockstack.org, you'll see our API that allow you to interrogate the chain, get transaction information. You can also go to a chain explorer and use that as well, if you have the transaction ID.
Do you envision enterprise applications being built on Blockstack, and how do you think companies will react if their employees have private data lockers with confidential or proprietary information?
It's a great question. So we actually have one application that's super popular, Graphite, and he was looking to do that kind of thing with that because it's very similar to Google Docs. And so we did some work with them to help make that possible so that you could have a private hub for your company. That might be one way to do it. So the answer to, do we envision enterprise companies doing it? Yes. Do we have it all worked out how it's going to happen? I don't think right now we're at the very beginning, so I don't think we have the ideal answer, but we're working towards it. One of our engineers created a project called Radix that allows for better sharing. And that project allows multiplayer apps to share data more easily and interact more easily. He's got a pretty good example, something called Banter that we can go and look at. I haven't played around with it very much, so I can't speak to it in great detail.
Thanks. My question sort of has two parts. The first part is just to check my understanding. Is it fair? Is it fair to think of it sort of like a Facebook login button, except that you own the data instead of Facebook, right?
Yeah.
That's correct. Okay, so the actual question then is, what sort of data can you actually store and publish on Blockstack? Like status updates too? Is it just address, picture? What kind of data is it that you store?
So yeah, and most any kind of file, pictures. I'm not sure. It depends on the size of the file type. The limit right now is 25 megabytes. You might have to store things in pages. Matt can probably tell you more detail about how that storage happens, but we don't have any limit on the type of data that you can store, other than the size.
So you said that there's one Gaia hub, and there's kind of like, I guess, a model to make more of those. And I'm wondering, as a developer, do I need to think about things like BNS propagation? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if somebody puts data in, can another user sort of interact with that? And they're like a Radix group or something like that, you know, like, is it real time?
So right now we have the default hub. Some developers have created their own hub, like Justin has for Graphite. We're at the very beginning, so we don't have a lot of hub services out there. The idea is that I believe the idea is that we're going to replicate the data is replicated on many hubs. I'm not sure what the interaction is between BNS and Radix and all that, so that might be a better question for Matt. Sorry. Any other questions? Okay, Owen, I see a hand. I'm not going to go with this microphone because it's
Okay, yeah, I'm just a little bit curious to know, as you said, you guys are based in New York, right?
Yes.
So I'm just a little surprised why the SEC approved a tool like this to be released and developed in that.
So they did not approve the tool, they approved the coin, right, as a cryptocurrency. And, I'm not up on the SEC why they do or why they don't. I think they know that cryptocurrencies are coming online, and at some point they're going to have to start evaluating them. And so by doing what we did, we're starting on what we hope is a trend to make people feel more comfortable. There are a lot of people out there I know that are trading Bitcoin and other kinds of coin, but for somebody like my mom, who used to trade stocks for a living, she wouldn't touch it, because it's not approved. or monitored by an organization like the SEC. So if you want to learn more about how they approved it and what they approved it, you have to go to the website and read the documentation associated with that.
All right, so thank you so much, Mary. I think it was very insightful. That was a very insightful presentation, and just wanted to say that I think personally the key thing about Blockstack is that just the onboarding is really, really smooth. If you try any of the dApps on the store, you will see that it's just really, really quick. And if you logged in before on your browser, whether it's on the phone, whether it's on the computer, then it's even quicker. So the onboarding is really great. And the Zero-to-dApp tutorial, that's something I can definitely recommend to give that a shot. It's supposed to take less than an hour. For me, it took me over 2 hours, but that's like literally the first thing I've ever built, and I've managed to pull it off and actually deploy the site. What they do is they got this animal kingdom app, which basically you can just follow the instructions and it creates a very similar type of app and create your special character animal that is in charge of a certain area. So you create your own kingdom and you create your own animal. I chose a cookie cutter shark for mine, so you can go check it out. It's actually there as well now. But yeah, thank you so much, Mary. And now it's time for Matt for a more technical presentation.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Mary. So I will admit, my name is Matt Davis. I will admit to feeling a little bit like the high school math teacher who's just one lesson ahead of the students, because I'm not actually up here to be a Blockstack expert, but I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a technical overview. I am the co-founder of an organization called Change Labs. We're basically an emerging technology experimentation lab for emerging technology projects for social good. So a little bit about my background. I'm a software engineer by trade, but I also have a deep background in international human rights work. I worked in the President Carter's Human Rights Office for 2 years. And I've also done a lot of kind of grassroots social justice activism. So I kind of came to the decentralization movement through an interest in how it can help reconfigure power dynamics and be used by causes where they're facing issues of surveillance or censorship, these kinds of things. So that's sort of the lens that I came to all of this through. And I've actually been following the Blockstack project for quite a while. I first got involved with it back in 2016 through the Decentralized Web Summit that was organized by the Internet Archive. So that was when I first kind of found out about it. And at that point, it had just kind of had its first pivot away from what it was originally called OneName, where it was just solely focused on self-sovereign identity and login. And it's since grown along into a full stack project, as Mary kind of alluded to. But what originally excited me about the project was specific things about their approach. I really liked how it tried to minimize the amount of information that's stored on chain, which really made it scalable and usable in a way that a lot of other types of blockchain projects really weren't, especially at the time. And so what that means is that it minimizes to as much as humanly possible what's an actual transaction on chain. So really, when you create an identity, you're making a transaction on the blockchain, and that's about it. And that transaction creates a hash which points to your identity, which is stored in Atlas. Which, speaking briefly to the question about DNS propagation, it's an eventually consistent peer-to-peer protocol. Atlas is what it's referred to as, and it uses a custom gossip protocol. So if you were running your own Gaia, it would be eventually consistent, not immediate. So how this is different from some other approaches, in many systems you may be familiar with, a lot of code is stored on chain in a smart contract or the like. and creates kind of a heavy transactional experience, which can cause delays. Also, some other systems have Turing-complete smart contracts, which are compiled and evaluated at runtime. I'll get into a little bit more why Blockstack has taken a different approach with their smart contract language later on. But it's been cool to see this project evolve over the years. Like I said, when I first found out about it, it was really just focused on naming, and then they got into the decentralized storage system, Gaia, and again are really just focusing more on giving the user back control, not just over their identity, but over their data and their whole experience of interacting with apps. And obviously now the Stacks token has come forward as well, and smart contracts are on the way. And I'll get into some of the details of those. But the first thing I really wanted to start off with was just how easy they've made the developer experience. And they really abstracted away so much of the complexity and minimize the amount that's done on chain in a way that makes it super simple to get started with building applications without having to really know depths of what's going on in the layer. And so starting with kind of the authentication layer, if you wanted to start building a brand new Blockstack app today, you would probably use blockstack.js, which is just an NPM library. It's as easy as npm install Blockstack, and then creating a manifest file to declare some basic information about your application, as you see here. If you've written a progressive web app before, this may look kind of familiar to you. It's sort of modeled on that manifest structure. And then it's literally just a few basic methods that you're calling on the Blockstack library to start setting up authentication. So in this example, we've got a button here, and when it is clicked, we're calling the redirect to sign in method. And you can also feed in additional parameters. So what we see here is adding a specific additional permission request that will go along with the redirect. So here we're asking for access to a user's email address, for example. And what you'll see is when that redirects to the Blockstack browser for you to log in with your Blockstack identity, it shows the specific permissions that have been requested by that application and also the data from that manifest file that was included before. So then once you've authenticated through the Blockstack system, you'll get redirected back to your application. And here we have just a basic check if sign-in is pending, and once it is completed, a redirection, for example. At that point, if you are signed in, then you can start loading data. And it really is as simple as it looks. Once you've loaded user data, that will vary depending on the permissions and the data that's been stored. A little bit about the data types that you can store. It really is pretty arbitrary. Mary mentioned the 25 megabyte limit, and you can store JSON, you can store pointers to other types of files, or you can store any kind of normal binary data as well. And then you have access. So this is what a user profile may look like under the hood, and this is pointing at specific data and its location in a specific Gaia hub, as well as other information here that can be stored based on any application can add to this as they want. So actually adding your own storage is also super simple. It's just another method called put file. By default, any kind of plain text data is encrypted in Gaia end to end. So that means that just by using the normal put file method without any additional parameters on it, as you see here, this would be stored in a way that no one that doesn't have your private key and is you will not be able to access that data. And getting it back out, because this obviously assumes you're already authenticated and you've already proven your identity in the application. But getting it back out is just as simple as you see here as well. Another simple method called, you see it's using a unique namespace with that file. And it already knows based on the profile data that you saw which Gaia you should be looking at to retrieve that data from. It's also possible to do some basic multiplayer storage. You where you can actually share data with each other, but this is, and Radix, the application that Mary referred to as maybe a slightly more sophisticated version of this. This is what's built into Blockstack today, though, is the ability to create a basic unencrypted sharing of data that's less secure, perhaps, but you want other people to be able to read data that you've created via app. It requires one additional permission to publish data here, which basically says this app will be allowed, this specific app that I'm interacting with will be allowed to publish data unencrypted on my behalf. And once you enable that permission, you see how we're having to specifically feed in an additional option for unencrypting or passing the data unencrypted when we put the file. And then for retrieval, you can send in the specific username of the user that you'd like to retrieve data for without needing to decrypt it. And because that permission has been set on the application, from your username, you are allowing that application to retrieve data unencrypted on your behalf. So that's the basics of just authentication, getting and putting data. Maybe we should pause there for a moment and see if there are any questions about that part. You got the other mic?
Can't figure out.
I think it may be for the recording too. So here he comes.
I have a question about the private key. Where is the private key stored and who has access to it? If the apps have access to my private key so they can encrypt my data, does that mean that they could also access my private data on other apps with the same key?
Yeah, that's a good question. So apps can share data, but it requires additional permission levels.
Where's the key?
Where is the key?
Where is the private, I can't get an answer to this question. Where's the private key stored?
I believe it's stored on your machine. No. Mary, do you know if that's correct? Yeah.
You have to store your private key. So we give it to you and you have to store it.
But the apps will need that private key.
But the apps will need that private key in order to encrypt my data, so they need to have it at some point.
No, I believe they're using public key pair.
Oh, I see.
Any other questions on authentication or file retrieval? All right. Well, we can talk a little bit about smart contracts then. This is, as Mary mentioned, it's a new feature that's not yet fully released. And again, as someone who's watched the progress of this project for quite a long time, this was a promised feature, and it's really cool to see it start to come to fruition. They've taken some big design decision differences from a lot of the smart contracts you've probably heard about or played with before. So the kind of starting place here is that smart contracts are not easy to write, and especially if the tools aren't the correct tools to be using. A lot of smart contracts that people are probably familiar with are Turing complete and compiled, and both of these are design decisions that Blockstack chose to deviate from. So things like reentrancy, which has been a major vulnerability in some Ethereum smart contracts, where you're calling a function from another contract and it's injecting malicious behavior into yours, are not possible with Blockstack's smart contracts. And that is very intentional because the smart contract has been made to be Turing incomplete. And it is, instead of being compiled, it is set up to actually be interpreted directly. So that means the exact same code that you write as a developer for the smart contract is stored on-chain and then is interpreted directly at runtime, as opposed to something being compiled. And what that means is that you can have high confidence that the code you write, if there's a bug in it, the bug is in the code and not potentially in the compiler itself, which has been problematic when, if there's a compiler error, debugging and having high confidence that it's not the code or that it's the compiler can be really problematic. So that means that you can't write reentrant functions, and you also can't do other things that people do to get around, for example, high gas prices in Ethereum, like batching transactions and things like that. So it's written in a way that also means it's completely statically analyzable, which means you can actually, without having to run the code directly, you can statically analyze and confirm exactly the intent behavior of the code as written. So, like I said, it's very new, and there's just a developer preview out right now. It's aiming for a testnet release next quarter, and I am excited to dig more into the details myself. I don't know if I can answer deep technical questions on Clarity, as it's called today, but if people have specific ones, I can give it a shot. Yeah.
I saw in one of the previous slides you said it was a Lisp-like pattern. Is it like a Lisp-like?
Yes, yes, it is based on Lisp. That's exactly right.
Okay, so is it Lisp or is it like a Lisp pattern?
A DAO.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So these smart contracts, are they going to run on the Stacks blockchain?
Yes.
Okay. And the Stacks blockchain is not a smart contracts question, it's a blockchain question. The Stacks blockchain, is it like a permissionless blockchain and is it public yet?
It is permissionless and public, yes.
It's already out there, yes?
Yes. Right?
And
it's already out there, right? It's in development.
And how do you, you're not representing Blockstack, but how do they plan to mitigate like the 51% tax and all? Because it's all young blockchains run into that issue, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I would refer you to the white paper probably. But what's been interesting to me to see, and one of the things that's actually occurred in the Blockstack project over time is they've built a layer called the virtual chain, and they've actually migrated their across blockchains multiple times. So originally, the entire network was running on top of Bitcoin itself. And they're only planning to migrate to the Stacks blockchain. My understanding is once it's already resilient enough to be robust against those kind of attacks.
All right, then I guess if we don't have any more questions, and thank you so much all for attending, and let's build some dApps. There's definitely lots of opportunities right now with Blockstack. I'm building something myself with a little team, but I'm still looking possibly for some collaboration. So if you're a React developer, and especially if you're into health and fitness, come speak to me. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much. We still got lots of food and drinks, and let's turn the music up, and the party is still going on. Thank you.
Thank you.